Let's continue graphing sine curves, but now let's look at graphs where the period has changed. In general, we have the following. Given a function sine of b times x, the period is going to be 2 pi over the absolute value of b. So for example, the regular sine of x, the period according to this formula is 2 pi over 1, which is just 2 pi. And in a later video, we'll give a little more justification for why this idea works. But anyway, let's just use it for the graph of the sine of 2x. Okay. The amplitude, right? We're not multiplying by anything out front, so the amplitude is 1. But the period is going to be 2 pi over 2, which is equal to pi. So the period for this sine function is only pi instead of 2 pi. So our graph, I'm going to take the same angle of attack as we did in the last video. My amplitude is 1. So I'm going to put in my bounds on the top and the bottom. The period is pi, so I'm going to mark off that first cycle and then cut this period into fourths. So pi over 4, 2 pi over 4, which is pi over 2, and 3 pi over 4. Okay. So remembering what our curve does at these quarters, at pi over 4 we go up to 1, at the next quarter back to 0, third quarter down to -1, and then back up to 0. Okay. On the left side, oops, negative pi over 4, negative pi over 2, negative 3 pi over 4, and negative pi, down to -1, back up to 0, up to 1, back to 0. Okay. So all we've done is we've taken our sine curve and compressed it horizontally by a factor of 2. You might recall from algebra that when you replace an x with 2 times x, you compress it horizontally by a factor of 2. If we were to multiply or replace our x with something less than 1 times x, we would stretch horizontally. So let's take a look at that. Let's try sine of 1/4 times x. Okay. Again, I haven't multiplied by anything out front, so my amplitude is still 1. My period is going to be 2 pi divided by a quarter, which is 8 pi. Since we replaced our x with a 1/4 times x, we stretched horizontally by a factor of 4. So our period of 2 pi has now become a period of 8 pi. Okay. Put in the bounds. Right. Starting at 0, mark off the end of the first cycle at 8 pi. and then cut it up into quarters. 2 pi, 4 pi, 6 pi. Okay. So we go up, back to 0, down, back to 0. Put down our quarters on the left side, down to -1, up to 0, up, back to 0. Okay. So let's do one more, just to make it a little more complicated. Let's try 3 times the sine. Oh, let's do 4x. Okay. So 3 times the sine of 4x. The amplitude, 3, since we multiplied our function by 3. The period is 2 pi over 4, which is just pi over 2, right? Since we replaced x with 4 times x, we're compressing horizontally by a factor of 4. Okay, throw in the boundaries. Three and -3. Mark off my period. For the first complete cycle, it's going to go up to pi over 2. So now I'm going to chop that into quarters. So let's see here, pi over 2 times 1/4, pi over 8. So pi over 8, 2 pi over 8, which is pi over 4, 3 pi over 8, and then 4 pi over 8, which is the pi over 2. Okay. This 3 is positive, so we go up. Oops. We go up, back to 0, down to -3, back up to 0. And again on the left side. So down, up, down. In future videos, we'll get into shifts right or left, which is usually called a phase shift, as well as vertical translations up and down.